Jamal Reaves walked into class a minute late and watched the professor erase his name from the attendance list, without a word. The only black student in a room of 30, he spoke up and was told, "You don't belong here unless you're cleaning." Cameras were off, the room went silent, but someone was recording. What happened next shattered the university. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The echo of Jamal C. Reeves' sneakers hitting the polished marble floors of Cambridge's Rutherford Hall was a sound that didn't belong, not because it was loud. In fact, it was barely audible beneath the hush of hushed accents and clipped British greetings, but because it was unfamiliar. It was a sound that had never carried the weight of someone like him. Not in this space, not in this history. Jamal's first steps into the lecture hall felt like walking into a museum. Tall arched windows let in a gray spill of London light, casting long shadows across rows of century-old benches. Ornate gold frames lined the walls. Oil portraits of past scholars, all of them white, stern and frozen in importance. It was a shrine to tradition, and tradition here was skin deep. He paused at the entrance, clutching a fraying notebook to his chest. The room was already nearly full, with clusters of students arranged in predictable patterns. Boys in beige chinos, girls with posh accents and expensive pens. The moment Jamal stepped in, 30 heads turned in synchronized curiosity. Not a single face mirrored his own. He wasn't just the new kid, he was the only black kid. He took a seat in the back, where the shadows gathered and expectations were lowest. Conversations resumed around him, but quieter now, like he'd brought an invisible fog into the room. Eyes flicked toward him then away, pretending not to stare, yet watching, always watching. The rustle of paper stopped as Professor Alistair Kingsley entered, white-haired, sharp-featured and dressed like a man allergic to modernity. Kingsley didn't greet the class, he commanded it. With a nod that barely acknowledged their existence, he stepped to the front and scribbled a long equation on the chalkboard. The formula stretched nearly the full width of the board, looping and weaving like a mathematical labyrinth. No name, no explanation, just a simple line scrawled underneath in heavy chalk. Unsolved for 42 years. Then, with a dry chuckle that tasted of arrogance, Kingsley turned to the room. "Solve this and I'll retire." The class erupted in polite laughter. The kind of laughter that didn't believe it was a challenge, but an inside joke. The kind of joke meant only for those who belonged. Jamal didn't laugh. He didn't blink. His eyes were fixed on the board, heart thudding in his chest. There was something in the way the equation danced, a rhythm he recognized. Patterns weren't just numbers to him, they were language. He saw codes in colors, steps in sounds. Back home in Atlanta, he used to solve puzzles like these on napkins during his lunch break, while his classmates stared at phones. Here he reached for his pen slowly, like it might betray him, and copied the equation in the top corner of his notebook. His mind hummed. He didn't know it yet, but something was already clicking. Around him, students whispered about internships, summer programs in Geneva, the upcoming ball. No one talked to him, they talked around him. Even when someone needed a pencil, they asked the person beside him instead. His presence was tolerated, not welcomed. But Jamal wasn't new to being invisible. He had learned long ago that the best way to be seen was to outthink everyone in the room. Over the next hour, Kingsley's voice droned on through a lecture about boundary conditions and harmonic oscillators. Jamal listened, nodded, scribbled, and absorbed. But always, his eyes drifted back to the board, back to that one equation, back to the unspoken dare. After class, he lingered. While other students packed designer bags and filed out in packs, Jamal stood up and approached the board. It was taller than him, covered in decades of ghost equations and eraser dust. He stared at the problem like it had insulted him personally. He didn't touch the chalk. Not yet. He just stood there, letting the numbers simmer in his head. Behind him, the janitor shuffled in, giving him a quick glance before focusing on wiping desks. Even that small look felt like a question. "Why are you still here?" He stepped closer. The variables danced again, but this time slower, clearer. Something flickered in the corner of his mind, a memory of a theorem he'd once modified on the back of a bus ticket. His fingers twitched, but then he caught movement in the reflection of the window. A group of students stood just outside the door, watching him, laugh. He froze. One of them pointed through the glass and mouthed something he couldn't hear. But the tone, the smirk, The synchronized snickering. It told him enough. The equation was their joke. He was part of the punchline. Jamal dropped the chalk. He didn't say anything. He didn't make a scene. He picked up his bag and walked out slowly, deliberately, like a man refusing to flinch. But inside, a quiet storm had started. That night, he didn't go to the freshman mixer. He didn't join the WhatsApp group chat his classmates invited each other to in class. Instead, he sat at his dorm desk, the room cold and barely furnished. A single bulb cast a yellow light over pages of scribbled notes and discarded formulas. He began working on the problem. Not to impress anyone, not to win anything, but because the equation wouldn't leave him alone. The symbols became shadows that followed him into dreams. At breakfast, he calculated derivatives in his oatmeal. On the walk to class, he rearranged constants in the fog on the window. No one noticed. That was fine. Let them sleep. Let them laugh. He had work to do. 3 days passed. Jamal hadn't spoken more than 10 words to anyone. Even his professors seemed to forget his name. One even called him Jerome during roll call, never correcting it. And then came Monday. Lecture Hall B. First class of the week. Jamal walked in again. Same seat, same shadows. He sat quietly while Professor Kingsley wrote another string of variables, barely glancing at the class. A low murmur filled the room. Outside, rain pattered against the windows. Inside, tension thickened. But something had changed. Jamal opened his notebook, and beside the original equation, in tiny perfect handwriting, was something new. A full, elegant, step-by-step solution. It wasn't just right. It was beautiful. His heart pounded. It had taken him the weekend, but he had done it, alone, silently, unapologetically. He didn't know who would believe him. He didn't know what would happen. But he knew one thing. Today he was going to raise his hand. Cliffhanger. As he flipped the page, ready to challenge the room, his eyes locked on a line of chalk under the original equation, one he hadn't noticed before. Someone had added it over the weekend. Solve this, and I'll retire. Jamal froze. Because this time, he wasn't the only one who saw it. At the back of the hall, Dean Harrison had just walked in, and he was watching. Professor Alistair Kingsley didn't enter the lecture hall. He arrived. There was a difference. His steps were slow, deliberate, laced with the kind of confidence that only came from 3 decades of academic worship. He wore his signature double-breasted navy blazer, his silver pocket watch visible beneath the cuff, swinging slightly with every movement like a pendulum. The room quieted instantly, as if the very air understood its place. To most, Kingsley wasn't just a professor, he was a monument. The kind students spoke of in whispers before exams. His name was etched into the legacy of Cambridge's mathematics department, his published theorems cited in hundreds of journals, his influence stretching across ocean. His students didn't just aim to learn from him, they aimed to survive him. Jamal Reaves kept his eyes low as Kingsley stepped to the center of the hall, chalk already in hand before his coat hit the chair. This, the professor said, his voice slicing clean through the room like a violin string, is the final frontier of this department's intellectual history. He turned toward the massive blackboard, now perfectly clean except for the single bold equation that had loomed there since Jamal's first day. A hush fell across the 400-seat auditorium. Even the flickering fluorescence above seemed to pause. Kingsley tapped the chalk against the edge of the board, emphasizing each syllable, like a conductor readying his orchestra. Unsolved for 42 years, he said. Published in the Journal of Pure Mathematics. And not one soul, he paused, eyes skimming the room, has come close. He stepped back, hands behind his back. The chalk clinked softly on the wooden tray. Then with a smile that twisted like a blade, he added, "Solve this and I'll retire." The lecture hall burst into laughter. Some of it was genuine. Most of it was performative. The kind of laughter meant to signal belonging. To be in on the joke was to be on the right side of history. Jamal didn't laugh. He didn't even look up, because he wasn't part of the joke. He was the disruption to it. Jamal's hand hovered above his notebook, pencil trembling not with fear but anticipation. The equation had visited him in his sleep again last night. This time clearer, cleaner, almost like it was inviting him to try again. He sketched a pattern on the page, one he hadn't considered before. While Kingsley launched into a lecture on topological structures, Jamal tuned it out. His world narrowed to the rhythm of graphite against paper. His pencil moved fast, almost too fast. He didn't know why the numbers made sense the way they did. But they did. The solution didn't come from the textbook. It came from instinct, like a memory his mind hadn't realized it had stored. He flipped to a new page, muttering under his breath as he connected functions and rerouted assumptions. It wasn't just that he saw patterns others didn't. It was that he felt them, like hearing a symphony in static. Around him, classmates took notes dutifully, their eyes darting up and down, but no one noticed him. Not yet. By the time the lecture was nearing its end, Jamal had stopped hearing anything but his own heartbeat. His notebook page was now full. The solution sat there, complete, or at least he thought it was. He didn't dare celebrate. Not yet. He needed one confirmation, one push. As Kingsley droned on about legacy, Jamal slowly raised his hand. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't desperate. It was quiet, calm. But something shifted in the room anyway. A few students looked back in surprise. Jamal wasn't known to speak. He hadn't raised his hand once all semester. In fact, several students weren't even sure if he could. That's how invisible he'd been kept. Kingsley stopped mid-sentence. "Yes?" he said, tone clipped, the word already heavy with doubt. Jamal stood up. "I had a question about the equation you mentioned," he said, voice steady. "I think there's a step that might have been overlooked." There was a pause. A long one. Kingsley blinked. "You think something's been overlooked?" he repeated, each word landing like a test. Jamal nodded. "I've been working on it since the first lecture. I think I might have found a path to a solution." Snickers rippled across the room. A girl 2 rows up rolled her eyes. A boy near the aisle whispered something to his friend, who stifled a laugh. Kingsley's smile returned, cold, calculated. "Well, Mr. Reaves," he said slowly, "I suppose we should all prepare for my retirement. Then." Laughter again, bigger this time. Jamal didn't laugh. He clutched his notebook tighter, gaze locked on the board. "Could I approach the board?" That's when the door creaked open. From the side of the hall, wearing a dark gray suit and polished shoes, Dean Franklin Harrison stepped in quietly. His eyes scanned the room, not lazily, but with intent. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. Faculty recognized him instantly. Some students did too. He walked down the side steps, hands clasped behind his back, and stopped near the 3rd row. Kingsley noticed. His posture stiffened. Jamal noticed too, but he didn't back down. He stepped forward, one foot in front of the other, heart thumping harder now. Not from fear, but from the unmistakable weight of a moment about to change everything. As Jamal reached for the chalk, hand steady despite the heat crawling up his neck, Kingsley turned slightly toward the dean and muttered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear, "He's not serious, is he?" Dean Harrison didn't answer. He just watched. The chalk felt cold in Jamal's hand, smoother than he expected, like it had never truly been gripped before. It hadn't. Not for this. For decades, the equation had stood untouched in spirit, too sacred for students to dare, too complex for anyone but Kingsley to recite as gospel. Now, a 17-year-old scholarship kid from Atlanta stood at the altar of British mathematics with nothing but his mind and a burning belief in what he saw. He didn't hesitate. The room had fallen completely silent, not in anticipation, but disbelief. Jamal wasn't supposed to be here. Not at this board. Not this close to the legacy. Yet he began to write. The first line came effortlessly. The next, an inversion no one had seen. Then a substitution, elegant and seamless. The board began to fill. Kingsley's posture shifted. What started as smug patience hardened into quiet attention. His eyes narrowed. His arms crossed tighter. Jamal wasn't showboating. Every movement was precise. Every line was justified. He wasn't guessing. He was orchestrating. What made it unsettling was the ease. His approach wasn't loud or flashy. It was clean, crisp, like someone solving a riddle they'd heard as a child. A few students leaned forward, trying to follow. Then more. The tension crept in slowly. A ripple of unease brushed through the rows. Jamal reached the midpoint of the solution, a turning point where most known approaches collapsed. He didn't collapse. He accelerated. His hand moved faster. Symbols layered, counterweights emerged, and variables began collapsing perfectly. At the bottom right corner, he paused, circled a fraction, adjusted a coefficient, then underlined the final simplification. A clean, irrefutable, logical path to the solution. Finished. He capped the chalk and stepped back. His breath wasn't heavy, but something in the air was, something unspoken. An aftershock of what had just happened. No one spoke. Not even Kingsley. Jamal turned around, notebook still in hand. He didn't smile. He didn't ask for applause. He just looked at Kingsley and said, "I think that completes the loop in the third vector set." It wasn't a flex. It was a fact. Kingsley opened his mouth, but nothing came. His face held that strange blend of disbelief and calculated doubt. He turned to the board, eyes scanning the steps. He said nothing. Then Dean Harrison stood. His voice cut through the silence. "Professor Kingsley, was that correct?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Kingsley's jaw clenched. "It's an interesting approach." The students stirred. "Interesting and correct aren't the same," the dean said. Kingsley's eyes flashed, but his tone stayed measured. "Mathematics isn't about speed, Dean. It's about rigor. This hasn't been verified. Anyone can sketch an answer." Jamal spoke up, voice steady. "I've documented the full proof in my notebook, step by step. I'd be happy to submit it to peer review." It was the kind of answer a seasoned academic would give. And that's what shook the room the most. Jamal didn't sound like a student. He sounded like a peer. Kingsley turned away from the board, hands now clasped behind his back, trying to maintain control. "Perhaps you'd like to take over the lecture, Mr. Reaves." There it was, the mask cracking. Jamal didn't respond. He didn't need to. The board said enough. The students didn't clap. But their silence had shifted. This wasn't the same silence as before. This was a silence that recognized rupture, a split in the order of things, a disruption. Dean Harrison nodded slowly. "I'll have the department review it," he said. "Thoroughly." Kingsley gave a tight nod, then turned to erase the board, but his hand hovered. For a second he couldn't do it. Couldn't bring himself to wipe away the proof written by the boy whose very presence had always felt like a challenge. He left the room instead. No words. No closing remarks. Just left. The door shut behind him. Jamal stood alone at the front now, facing 400 stunned faces. The moment should have been vindication. But it didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. Because he knew the storm hadn't passed. It had just been named. As the crowd finally began to stir, whispering, packing up, sneaking glances at him like he'd committed some unspeakable defiance, Jamal turned to retrieve his notebook. Dean Harrison approached slowly. "That was impressive," he said, voice neutral but curious. "Thank you," Jamal replied, eyes down. The dean paused. "What's your background?" Jamal looked up. "Atlanta, public school, self-taught, mostly." The dean nodded slowly. "You'll be hearing from the department." His tone was unreadable. As Jamal returned to his seat, still clutching the chalk-stained notebook, a group of students brushed past him toward the exit. One of them, the same boy who had laughed earlier, muttered under his breath, "Probably stole it off the internet." Jamal looked up, but the boy didn't stop. Neither did the whispers that followed him out. But what Jamal didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that the real test wasn't whether he could solve the problem. It was whether Cambridge could handle that he had. Jamal hadn't planned to go up to the board that day. But then again, none of this had been part of anyone's plan. The lecture hall still held the aftertaste of disbelief. The chalk dust from his proof lingered in the air. Particles of defiance suspended like rebellion mid-flight. Students whispered in fractured fragments, not loud enough to be heard, but heavy enough to be felt. Every step Jamal took back to his seat echoed like a challenge. He wasn't supposed to walk up there. He wasn't supposed to know the answer. And yet, he did. Dean Harrison remained seated near the third row, motionless, watching, not judging, not yet, but watching, with that unnerving stillness reserved for men who calculate before they act. Professor Kingsley stood still at the front, jaw clenched tight, knuckles slightly pale where his hands gripped the edge of the desk. He hadn't said a word since Jamal finished. The board remained untouched, Jamal's work shining in raw clarity beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. "You know, Mr. Reaves," Kingsley finally said, voice brittle with restraint, "math is not a magic trick." Jamal met his eyes. Calm. Wasn't trying to impress anyone. The words weren't loud, but they cut deep. A few students turned in their seats. The tension was no longer just curiosity, it was an undercurrent of instability. Something was shifting, but no one could name it yet. They had just witnessed something unthinkable. A scholarship kid, a black teenager from a public high school, walk into the most revered lecture hall in England and crack a problem that had stumped generations. And worse, he had done it like it was nothing. Kingsley stepped forward. clearing his throat. Well then, he said dryly, if that's how lightly we take historic conjectures these days, I suppose we should all just hand in solutions and call ourselves prodigies. A ripple of laughter came from a few students, forced awkward, trying to stabilize the hierarchy. Jamal didn't respond. He simply walked back to the front, flipping open his notebook again. The room shifted in their chairs as he placed it on the edge of the podium. I documented the process. It's in here, he said, step by step. Nothing fancy. Kingsley didn't look at the notebook. Instead, he looked at Dean Harrison. I think we've had enough theatrics for today, he said, turning away. Class dismissed. But no one moved. Because the dean stood up. Professor Kingsley, Harrison said, tone slow, deliberate. I think we should give the student a chance to finish what he started. A beat passed. 2. Kingsley didn't turn. But his neck flushed red. If he insists, the professor muttered, biting each syllable. Jamal took that as permission. He stepped back to the board, eyes scanning his earlier steps. He could see the whole thing now, like light refracting off water. Every solution connecting into a structure that felt less like mathematics and more like music. He reached for a new piece of chalk. The hall had never been this quiet. He placed a fresh matrix to the side of the original equation. Some students leaned forward, some leaned back. One girl pulled out her phone and began recording, subtly holding it against her leg. She wasn't alone. The first line Jamal wrote was a function swap. Simple, elegant. The second, a trick of symmetry that most would have overlooked. And then came the third. A boundary shift that unlocked the rest of the equation like a key in a locked vault. It had been 42 years since anyone had touched this problem. Jamal cracked it wide open in 40 seconds. By the time he wrote the final solution, the chalk was down to a nub. He pressed the period at the end of the last line, stepped back, and dropped the chalk into the tray with a soft click. He turned around, silent, not the breathless kind, the terrified kind, because what he had just done didn't look like a fluke. It looked like a correction to the system. Then, slowly, whispers began. Quiet at first, then rising. He didn't, did he? That was it. Was that real? He solved it? Wait, he solved it? No one applauded. Applause would have been too human. What they were feeling was something colder. Something threatened. A professor in the corner folded his arms. Another whispered something to the faculty beside him. Kingsley hadn't moved. His eyes were locked on the board, unreadable. Dean Harrison was the only one who stepped forward. He looked at the board for a long moment. Then he turned to Jamal. Where did you learn this? Jamal shrugged. Back home. Atlanta. I read a lot. Modified some old systems I found online. It just made sense. Did anyone help you? Jamal tilted his head, confused. No. It's just math. Dean Harrison nodded once, but said nothing more. He simply turned and left the hall without a word. Jamal's breath caught in his throat. That wasn't encouragement. It wasn't confirmation. It was a question left hanging in the air, like smoke. Kingsley finally moved. His hands trembled slightly as he closed his folder. He didn't speak to Jamal, didn't acknowledge the board. He simply picked up his things, walked to the door, and stormed out. His shoulder clipped a student's bag on the way out, sending it spinning off the bench. He didn't stop to apologize. The entire room watched him go, and then slowly turned back to Jamal. Some eyes were wide with wonder. Others narrowed with disbelief. But no one looked at him the way they had that morning. The black kid had cracked the unsolvable. In front of their eyes. In less than a minute, Jamal stood still. The chalk dust now smeared on the side of his hand like war paint. His heart was racing, but his face didn't show it. He wouldn't give them that. He quietly picked up his notebook and walked toward the exit, not looking at anyone. But as he passed by, one student, a tall boy in a Ralph Lauren sweater, someone Jamal had seen whispering earlier, leaned to the side and muttered just loud enough to hear, "Bet his daddy did it for him. Can't be that smart." The words were venom, quiet, casual, and deliberate. Jamal paused for a fraction of a second, then walked on. But as he pushed open the doors of the lecture hall, Jamal felt the vibration of his phone in his pocket. A notification. He glanced down. One new email. Subject line, Honor Council meeting, urgent. And just like that, he knew they weren't going to let this go. The math building at Cambridge had never felt louder, not because of voices, but because of silence. The kind of silence that follows you, that grows behind your back like a shadow, with teeth. Jamal felt it the moment he stepped through the courtyard gates. The next morning, students didn't stop and stare. They didn't need to. The change in energy was enough. A shift. The same mouths that used to ignore him now whispered when he passed, like he had turned radioactive overnight. The black kid had done the impossible, and no one knew what to do with that. They called it the 40-second miracle, but not out of awe, out of disbelief. Jamal didn't want the attention. He didn't care about the labels. But what started as curiosity quickly turned sharp, cold, suspicious. "Have you seen the video?" One boy whispered to another in the hallway, loud enough for Jamal to hear. "Looks edited. No way he did it that fast." "He probably used AI," said another. The words weren't questions. They were accusations cloaked as commentary. By the end of the day, someone had posted a screenshot of Jamal mid-solution on a Cambridge student forum, with the caption, "Prodigy or plagiarist?" There were over 300 comments by morning. Some defended him. Most didn't. "He's a freshman, for God's sake. This is clearly above undergrad level. Something's fishy. Can anyone confirm he even belongs in that class?" Jamal stopped reading after the 12th comment. Even worse were the non-words. The stares that said more than insults ever could. Professors who used to pass by him without notice now paused when he entered a room. Their eyes lingered too long on his notebook. When he asked questions, they responded slowly, like decoding him for trickery. He'd catch one or two of them exchanging glances behind his back. Small, subtle, rehearsed. Jamal started sitting closer to exits. In the dining hall, a tray of food spilled near his table. The girl who dropped it looked at him like it was his fault. She muttered something under her breath as she walked away. He couldn't make out the words. He didn't need to. Then came the emails. At first, polite. "We'd love to understand your methodology." Then, inquisitive. "Would you mind resubmitting your source materials for review?" Then, probing. "Can you provide timestamps or metadata for your notebook entries?" Every one of them wrapped in academic courtesy. But Jamal knew a loaded question when he saw one. One afternoon, while walking back from a seminar, he found his name missing from the Math Society's weekly invite list. A friend of his, Chloe, one of the few who had spoken to him kindly before, shrugged when he asked. "They said the committee wanted to streamline this week's session." Streamline. Jamal nodded. Understood. Still, he kept his head down. Kept solving problems. Kept answering questions no one asked him. Because he wasn't here to prove anything. He was here to be undeniable. But the walls were closing in. 3 days after the incident, Jamal was pulled aside after class by Professor Reinhardt, one of the senior faculty members. A woman with a British-German accent and a tight, practiced smile. "Jamal, dear," she said, folding her hands in front of her like she was delivering bad news gently. "Some concerns have been raised about your recent work." He stood silent. Let her continue.
"Nothing formal yet," she added quickly. "Just questions. About process. About integrity."
"Am I being accused of something?" he asked quietly. No, she said. "A little too fast. Just clarity. Academic institutions take rigor very seriously." He nodded, thanked her, and walked away. But he didn't go to his dorm. He walked straight to the library instead, pulled out his notebook, and began annotating every step of his solution, sourcing references, listing alternative methods, time-stamping every page. Not for recognition, for defense, because he could feel it coming. And then it did. On the 5th day after the lecture, Jamal received an official summons in his university email. Subject: Academic Integrity Review Meeting. Location: North Hall, Room 5. Time: Friday. Attendees: Departmental Integrity Committee. Purpose: private discussion regarding recent coursework submissions and concerns regarding academic authorship. Jamal read the email 3 times. Then once more. No accusations. No charges. Just concerns. That word again. When he arrived at North Hall that Friday, the skies were gray, as if the university itself was bracing for something. The building was older, colder, less frequented by students, more by administration. The kind of place where rules lived. He stepped into room 5B, and the air felt thinner. 3 faculty members sat at the long oak table. Professor Kingsley wasn't among them, but Jamal spotted 2 others who had been in the lecture that day, and one who hadn't, a man he didn't recognize. The chair in the middle introduced herself as Dr. Helen Wickford, head of academic standards. "Mr. Reaves," she began, formal, expressionless. "Thank you for coming." Jamal nodded. Of course, we'll keep this brief. But it wasn't brief. What followed was a slow, surgical interrogation. Can you walk us through how you arrived at your solution? Were you aware that this problem has been submitted to multiple global journals without resolution? Have you shared your notes with any third parties? Did you use any AI assistance, modeling software, or external tutoring? Every question dipped in sugar. Every glance heavy with doubt. I worked through the problem alone, Jamal said steadily. I didn't use AI. I read textbooks, watched lectures. I built on techniques I'd studied during high school. Would you be willing, another professor interrupted, to submit your device for metadata extraction? Metadata? Jamal repeated. Yes, to confirm that the notes were created as claimed. The room went still. Jamal inhaled. Are you asking me to turn over my personal device? For verification only, she said. Standard protocol. Jamal looked at each of them. Saw what this was. This wasn't about verifying his work. It was about dismantling it. Him. No, he said quietly. One of the professors leaned back, eyebrows raised. That could complicate the review process. Dr. Wickford said. Jamal nodded. I understand. They let him leave without comment. No decisions, no timelines. But he didn't need a verdict. The verdict had already been passed in their eyes the moment he solved the problem. He exited the building into the drizzle, hands buried deep in his pockets, heart pounding with something heavier than fear. Betrayal. His phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. Are you okay? I heard something's going on. People are saying your scholarship might be under review. Jamal stared at the message, then typed one word back. Yeah, but he wasn't. Because this wasn't just whispers anymore. It was warnings. Later that night, as Jamal sat at his desk, surrounded by notebooks and half-drunk tea, another email popped into his inbox. It wasn't from the math department. It was from the University Disciplinary Committee. Subject line. Private review scheduled. Allegation of academic misconduct. His hands went still. They had moved faster than he thought. The room had no windows. That was the first thing Jamal noticed when he walked into the disciplinary chamber. A narrow rectangular space in the lower east wing of the university's oldest building, where sunlight didn't reach and fairness didn't echo. The walls were a sterile off-white, but they felt gray, lifeless. The air had that cold, recycled stillness that reminded Jamal of old attics and quiet threats. At the center sat three professors, all white, all tenured. They didn't rise when he entered. They didn't offer greetings, just silence and stares. Jamal sat down slowly, placing his notebook on the table in front of him. No laptop, no bag, just him and the words in his head. Mr. Reaves, said the one in the center. Dr. Harold Morton. His voice was dry, mechanical. Do you know why you've been asked to attend this meeting? Jamal met his eyes. I received an email about an allegation of academic misconduct. Morton nodded. Correct. Specifically, suspicion of fraudulent authorship regarding the mathematical solution submitted during Professor Kingsley's lecture. The word fraudulent hung in the air like a stain. To be clear, said the woman on the left, Dr. Elaine Pierce, with thin spectacles and a tighter mouth, we're not accusing you. This is a fact-finding inquiry. But you're treating me like I already did something wrong, Jamal said quietly. Dr. Pierce didn't blink. We're treating the matter with the seriousness it warrants. The third man, Dr. Barton, leaned forward, folding his fingers. We'd like to hear in your own words how you arrived at your solution. Jamal inhaled slowly, steadying himself. He'd spent the last 2 days preparing for this. He'd rehearsed every theorem, every reference, every source. He began. I first saw the equation on the first day of class. I copied it into my notebook. It reminded me of a symmetry loop I worked on in high school, using variable inversions. I started experimenting with reduction. High school? Dr. Pierce interrupted. May I ask what kind of institution you attended? Jamal didn't flinch. Public. Atlanta. I was part of a magnet STEM program. I see. She didn't. That much was clear. Jamal continued. I've been working independently on variant algorithms since I was 14. I didn't have advanced resources, but I followed open-source research journals and online lectures. Over the weekend, I built the solution through matrix realignment and dynamic inversion. It wasn't AI, it was just me. His voice caught slightly at the end. Not with emotion, but restraint. He wasn't going to beg for their approval. Dr. Barton flipped through a folder of printed screenshots. There's been concern that the solution mirrors a rejected academic submission from MIT in 2019. Are you familiar with that paper? No, Jamal replied immediately. But if there's overlap, I'm happy to look at it. And your notes, Morton said. How long have you had them? I wrote them over the weekend, Jamal answered. You can check the ink consistency, the aging of the paper. We will, Morton said bluntly. Jamal leaned forward, his voice firmer now. Is that standard for everyone who solves something difficult? Or just me? The question struck harder than he intended. Because no one answered. Dr. Pierce cleared her throat. As you can imagine, Mr. Reaves, when a student with no prior published work claims to solve a 4-decade problem in front of a full lecture hall, scrutiny is natural. Natural, Jamal repeated. But not neutral. That made Pierce pause. He continued. Softer now. If someone with the right background had solved it, would we be here? You're making assumptions, Morton said quickly. No, sir, Jamal replied. You are. The silence after that was long. Then, Dr. Barton finally spoke. Regardless, we've decided to forward your material, your solution, your notes and your academic record, to an external academic review board, a neutral body. Jamal's fingers tightened around the edge of his chair. How long will that take? A few weeks, Barton said. In the meantime, you are temporarily suspended from all mathematics courses. The sentence landed like a blow. Jamal blinked. I'm being removed from class? For solving something too well? For the integrity of the process, Morton said. We must maintain objectivity while your claim is under review. What about the rest of my classes? You may continue attending non-math related coursework, but you are barred from submitting new material until the inquiry concludes. And if they clear me, Morton leaned back, then all privileges will be reinstated. Retroactively. Jamal stood, his voice low but sharp. You're not suspending me for misconduct. You're suspending me for making you uncomfortable. Be careful, Mr. Reaves, Pierce said quickly. Accusations work both ways. Jamal stared at the three of them. Their faces, their postures, they weren't worried about truth. They were worried about precedent. About protecting the fragile walls of a legacy he wasn't meant to enter. He picked up his notebook. I solved it, he said simply. And you can't unsee that. Without another word, he turned and walked out. The hall outside felt colder than it had going in. The walls seemed taller, the air tighter. A few students glanced at him as he passed, their expressions unreadable. He didn't go to class. He didn't go to lunch. He went straight back to his dorm, slammed the door shut behind him, and let his body sink against it. For the first time since arriving at Cambridge, Jamal felt something close to fear. Not because they'd accused him, but because deep down, he had already known they would. He booted up his laptop, fingers trembling slightly, and opened his email, dozens of messages, some supportive, some questioning. A few from news blogs asking for statements. He ignored them all. But one email sat at the top. Unread. No subject line. Just a sender, Alistair Kingsley. Jamal hesitated, then clicked. The message was short. Just a single sentence. You should have stayed quiet. No greeting. No sign-off. Just those 6 words. Jamal stared at the screen, chest rising slowly. He started to close the message, but stopped, because just below it, another email appeared. From Anonymous. Subject Rayek. Cambridge faculty chat screenshot. Attachment 1.5. He clicked, and what he saw made his blood run cold. It was a screenshot of a private faculty group chat. And in it, one message stood out. We can't let this American kid become the story. If we don't act now, this place changes forever. Jamal stared at the screenshot until the edges of the image blurred. The faculty names weren't fully visible. Most were shortened usernames, or email handles. But the thread was unmistakably real, time-stamped, recent, and unmistakably damning. We can't let this American kid become the story. If we don't act now, this place changes forever. Another line followed seconds later. The scholarship committee still has leverage. Let's not waste it. Jamal closed the laptop slowly, every movement deliberate. His heartbeat thundered beneath the silence of his room. Outside his window, Cambridge went on with its traditions. Bells ringing, students laughing across the quad, professors sipping afternoon tea beneath centuries-old towers. But inside this room, something had ruptured. Not because they doubted his work, but because they feared what it meant to recognize it. His skin, his accent, his origin. All of it was a contradiction to the system they'd built stone by stone, rule by rule, face by face. And his existence here, as a brilliant, undeniable outsider, wasn't part of the design. Kingsley's email still sat open, cold, calculated, masked as formality. You should have stayed quiet. It wasn't a warning. It was a reminder that he had overstepped an invisible line. He opened the full message thread now, reading line by line. Kingsley's tone was sterile, academic, but underneath, the language carried knives. Your recent conduct has raised serious concerns. We value enthusiasm, Mr. Reaves, but there is a fine line between curiosity and disruption. Cambridge has long prided itself on tradition, not just in academic content, but in the manner in which it is pursued. Your actions in class, though perhaps well-intentioned, have drawn unnecessary attention to a department that values discretion over drama. Consider this a moment of reflection. Reflection. Jamal exhaled, bitter. They wanted him humbled. Not because he was wrong, but because he was right too fast. Too loudly, too visibly. He opened a new document and began to type. Every email, every comment, every questionable policy he'd encountered since arriving. He built timelines, saved backups, linked articles, recorded incidents, compiling his own kind of proof. Not to retaliate, not yet, but to protect himself from a system designed to bend the truth until it snapped beneath his feet. He began keeping notes during lectures, not just on equations, but on body language, how professors avoided eye contact, how one stopped calling on him completely, how another gave him a public reminder about academic ethics before a midterm. He noticed how the group chats with classmates dried up, how his name vanished from social events, how even friendly faces, Chloe included, started keeping their distance, not from hatred, but from fear, as if defending him would put their own standing at risk. One evening, while walking back from the library, he overheard two professors talking just around a corridor. He stopped before they could see him. If we say nothing, it sets a precedent, one said. We don't have to revoke him. Just quietly redirect the attention. Kingsley's already pushing for disciplinary review. Then, the sound of footsteps, fading fast. Jamal didn't move for a full minute. He felt the cold bricks against his back. They weren't trying to prove he cheated. They were trying to erase the moment he didn't. Back in his room, he replayed Kingsley's words in his mind, over and over. This department values discretion over drama. Discretion meant silence. Drama meant him. He opened the screenshot again. And then he did something he hadn't done in weeks. He called home. The phone rang 4 times before his mother picked up. Her voice, warm, familiar, grounding, filled the silence like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Jamal? He didn't speak at first. Baby, you okay? He swallowed. Yeah. Just needed to hear your voice. She paused. She knew that tone. Is it school? He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. It's not the work. It's everything around it. There was a silence. Then they making it hard for you? Not directly. Not in ways you can record. But yeah, his mother didn't tell him to be strong. She didn't tell him it would be okay. She just said, then you make it undeniable, baby. Make it so loud they can't whisper around you. Jamal blinked back, something hot in his eyes. Trying. After he hung up, he made a decision. He backed up every file, every note, every screenshot, stored copies in cloud drives, encrypted folders, even on a USB hidden in a book spine. He wasn't being paranoid. He was being prepared. That week, another professor accidentally excluded him from a seminar invite. A guest speaker from MIT mentioned Jamal's name, only to be corrected, mid-presentation, by a faculty member. That matter is still under internal review. And then came the new notice. A formal letter slipped under his dorm door in a white envelope, university crest embossed at the top. Notice of scholarship reevaluation. It was 3 paragraphs of administrative language, wrapped in politeness. But the message was clear. His scholarship was now under academic and behavioral review. They were going for the jugular. Jamal sat on the edge of his bed, the letter trembling slightly in his hand. They weren't just trying to question him anymore. They were trying to remove him. Unexpected twist. That night, another anonymous message hit his inbox. No text. Just a subject line. Check this. You didn't see it from me. Attached was a PDF. He opened it slowly, bracing himself. It was a faculty newsletter, not for students. Internal circulation only. And buried on page 3, in a small italicized section titled Upcoming Motions, Proposal to refine departmental scholarship criteria to reflect academic heritage and institution alignment. Under review. Jamal sat frozen. They were rewriting the rules, in real time, to exclude him without ever naming him. Not because he broke them, but because he didn't. As Jamal stared at the newsletter, his phone buzzed again. This time a text. Unknown number. Watch your back. Not everyone wants you here. And some don't care how it ends. He dropped the phone. The message had no name, no number, no trace. The storm wasn't loud. It didn't come with thunder or lightning. It came in paperwork. It came in long silences and administrative language, in unreadable expressions during lectures and subtle omissions in schedules. It came with whispers of process and due diligence, wrapped in smiles that never reached the eye. Cambridge wasn't punishing Jamal Reaves with action. They were punishing him with procedure. It started 2 days after the anonymous text. A formal announcement from the mathematics department, a peer review investigation, had been launched into the validity of Jamal's equation, citing extraordinary academic claims requiring extraordinary verification. The announcement was not sent to Jamal directly. He found out through a student bulletin posted in the common lounge. Worse, the review board wasn't made of outside experts. It was composed of 3 faculty members, all hand-picked by the department head. All white, all with long-standing ties to Kingsley's professional network. They called it peer oversight. Jamal saw it for what it was, a containment strategy. Instead of confronting the problem, they built a cage around it. The first sign that the investigation was expanding came with a phone call Jamal didn't hear, but someone else did. Back in Atlanta, Principal Raquel Dennison sat behind her office desk when the call came in. The voice on the other end was polite, British accented, and firm. The man introduced himself as an academic liaison with Cambridge, and said he was doing a routine background check. Raquel raised an eyebrow. Background check? He's already enrolled. You're what? Verifying for a scholarship renewal. The voice hesitated. Well, not quite. We're reviewing some integrity matters, and we're simply cross-referencing disciplinary history. Disciplinary? Raquel leaned forward. Jamal Reaves never had a single disciplinary mark, not even a late slip. The voice on the line paused again, then more softly. You're absolutely certain? No concerns with plagiarism? Collaboration issues? Raquel stiffened. You're not calling for information, she said. You're fishing. And she hung up. Immediately she emailed Jamal. Subject line. Just got a weird call about you. Heads up. Jamal read the message 3 times, then sat back in his chair. They weren't just trying to discredit his present. They were rewriting his past. Later that day, he received a request from the university's administrative department, asking him to submit all prior academic records again, for archival clarity. The phrasing was careful, legal, but he knew what it meant. They were building a case. Not a real one. Just enough smoke to justify the fire. In class, the shift was visible. One professor skipped over his raised hand 3 times in a single lecture. Another questioned his lab partner about Jamal's work ethic during a private discussion. Then came the subtle psychological attacks. A teaching assistant accidentally sent Jamal a blind copied email meant for another faculty member, which read, "He's isolating himself. Let's see how long before he breaks or leaves." Jamal didn't respond. He just printed it. Saved it. Filed it. Because this wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about evidence. Legacy was protecting itself the only way it knew how, by erasing anything that didn't look like it. Jamal spent long nights documenting everything, cross-referencing timestamps, compiling inconsistencies, even photographing class seating arrangements to show how his assignments were marked differently. Still, the machine rolled forward. An official letter arrived in his dorm mail slot. Thick envelope, department seal. He opened it carefully. Inside, a 1-page notice. Subject: Notice of Scholarship Status. Under review. Dear Mr. Reaves, following the launch of the peer review investigation regarding your recent academic work, we regret to inform you that the continuation of your scholarship is now subject to departmental findings and committee recommendations. Pending review, your housing, tuition remission, and research access privileges will remain provisional. Sincerely, Cambridge Financial Aid Services. Jamal read the letter once, then placed it beside Kingsley's email. Different font, same intention, make him feel temporary. Replace his presence with paperwork. That night, Jamal sat alone in the campus cafe, a place that once buzzed with chatter. Now it felt like a stage he wasn't invited to perform on. A few students glanced at him from across the room. some with curiosity, some with avoidance. No one approached, except one. Chloe. She sat across from him quietly, without invitation. Her eyes were soft but cautious. I heard, she said gently. Jamal didn't speak. I don't believe it if that means anything. He looked up. Does it? She flinched slightly. I'm sorry, I didn't know it would get this far. You didn't think they'd come for the scholarship? I thought the proof would speak for itself. Jamal gave a dry laugh. Yeah, I thought so too. She reached into her bag and slid something across the table. It was a copy of the Student Tribunal Guidelines, printed, highlighted, annotated. I marked the parts where they're violating process. If you want to fight it, you'll need to know their game. He looked at her for a long second. Why are you helping me now? Her voice cracked, just slightly. Because I kept quiet when it started, and that silence helped them. Jamal nodded slowly, then said, keep the rest of your silence. I'm used to it. He picked up the booklet and walked out. Later that night, a second letter arrived, not from the math department. It was hand-delivered, typed, no header, no signature. It read, this is bigger than you think. There are donors watching, media inquiries. The faculty is being pressured from the top. They will offer you a way out, quietly. You'll finish your degree elsewhere. They'll preserve your record, protect their name. If you accept, the noise ends. If you don't, the damage begins. There was no name, no return address. But the message was clear. It wasn't just Kingsley anymore. It was the institution. The system was moving in sync, not to protect the truth, but to protect itself. Jamal placed the letter in his file and opened a new document. He typed a single title at the top of the page. If they silence me, let this be the record. Then his phone buzzed. A second email from the scholarship committee. Subject: final evaluation in progress. Decision within 72. He stared at the screen. 3 days left. 3 days before they tried to make him disappear. The laptop screen glowed in the darkness of Jamal's room, casting long shadows across the stacks of notebooks, empty mugs, and unopened letters. He hadn't slept. He couldn't, not when the walls were inching closer by the hour. 3 days. That was all the university had given him. 72 hours before they'd announced the verdict on his scholarship. His academic record, his presence. The silence from the administration wasn't just ominous, it was orchestral. A coordinated pause before an institutional strike. Jamal had learned by now that the truth didn't matter if the gatekeepers refused to say it out loud. So he made a choice. If they wouldn't speak his truth, he would. Not as Jamal C. Reaves. Not as the black kid from Atlanta, under review at Cambridge, but as someone untraceable. He logged into an encrypted browser and created a new account on an underground mathematics forum known for raw, unsupervised brilliance. A place where math wasn't about pedigree, but about proof. Where names didn't carry weight, ideas did. His username, null origin. He uploaded the entire equation, step by step, with annotations, revisions, alternatives. He wrote a breakdown of the logic, included scans of his original notebook, and added a preamble. This solution comes from an outsider. It wasn't crafted in the halls of Princeton, Cambridge, or Caltech, but it holds. Tear it apart, test it, disprove it, but judge the work, not the hands that wrote it. Then he clicked post. It was 2:11 a.m. when he went to sleep. At 7:03 a.m. his phone exploded, not with threats, with praise. The forum was on fire. Replies from PhDs, researchers, and industry mathematicians flooded the thread. Cleanest path to boundary equilibrium I've ever seen. Who the hell is this? This isn't just valid, this is elegant. Why wasn't this published before? Within hours the post had been mirrored to Reddit, shared to a cryptography Discord, and tweeted by a data scientist from Tokyo University. By noon, Jamal's anonymous solution had been seen by over 40,000 people across 3 continents. Then the thread got picked up by Mathematica Today, an academic digest with international reach. They titled their piece, "The Unknown Mathematician Who May Have Solved a 42-Year Problem in a Weekend." They didn't know his name, and that's why they loved it. Because to them, Null Origin 42 was a mystery. A voice from the shadows, a genius without credentials. And for the first time, Jamal's work was being judged, not by his skin, but by its substance. He watched the comments roll in. Unfiltered brilliance. This needs to be in peer review. Hire this person now. But something inside him twisted. He was being celebrated, only because they didn't know who he was. Not a student. Not black. Not Jamal. That night, he posted an update. Short. Direct. My name is Jamal Reaves. I'm a freshman at Cambridge. I'm 17. I'm black. And this is my work. He logged off and waited. For 15 minutes the thread was quiet. Then the replies started. Some were supportive, but many were not. You're saying this was solved by a freshman? Not buying it. Explain why you posted anonymously first. This reads like a stunt. Maybe the original post wasn't even yours. Of course the media hyped this. DI math, huh? Lost all credibility. I'd bet good money he ripped this from someone else's notes. The comments weren't about the math anymore. They were about him. The shift was immediate. Jarring. Praise became doubt. Doubt became hostility. Overnight, admiration decayed into interrogation. The same minds that had praised the solution were now retrofitting reasons to distrust it. Not because the proof changed, but because the person behind it had. Jamal didn't reply. He didn't have to. The silence said enough. By morning, the university had found out. He arrived at class to find a notice taped to the lecture hall door. His name typed in all caps, with a cold instruction. You are no longer permitted to bring personal computing devices into lecture halls or academic buildings until the review board concludes its investigation. Jamal stood still, staring at the paper. No warning. No conversation. Just punishment. He walked inside, baglight without his laptop. The students inside watched him enter, their eyes flicking quickly away once he met their gaze. One whispered. He posted it online. Right? Trying to go viral or something. Another, Cambridge doesn't like being embarrassed. A TA pretended not to hear. Jamal sat down, opened a blank notebook, and began to write again. If they took away his tools, he'd use his hands. If they took away his seat, he'd stand, but they wouldn't take his mind. Still, the impact was spreading. The administration began circulating new academic conduct policies, vaguely written but clearly targeted. Jamal was now cited as an example of what they called premature public dissemination of unresolved academic work. He wasn't just being punished. He was being made into a warning. Unexpected twist. Later that evening, Jamal received a message on the same underground forum from a user he didn't recognize. The message read, I'm a researcher at Caltech. We've reviewed your solution. It holds. You don't need Cambridge. You never did. Attached was a file, a draft of an independent paper, already formatted for submission to a major journal, with a space for co-authorship. Then another message came in. If you're ready to burn the mask, we'll stand with you. But Jamal didn't click accept. Not yet, because something inside him wasn't finished. He hadn't come to Cambridge to leave quietly. He had come to be undeniable, and they hadn't heard him yet. As he powered down for the night, another email arrived from the Cambridge Registrar's office. Subject: immediate disciplinary panel invitation. Urgent response required. Attached was a meeting link and a list of attendees. At the top, Dean Harrison, and just below him, Alistair Kingsley. Cambridge woke up to a quiet it didn't know how to handle. A kind of quiet that meant something had slipped through the cracks. Something the institution hadn't predicted, hadn't prepared for, hadn't sanctioned. Jamal felt it the moment he stepped out of his dorm. The morning sky a muted gray, the air cold enough to sting the skin. He expected whispers, glances, maybe another notice taped to a door. He didn't expect a crowd. They appeared like a wave cresting over the campus lawns. Students mostly black, some brown, some white allies trailing behind. Hoodies, puffer jackets, gloves gripping handmade posters. They weren't Cambridge students. They weren't dressed like Cambridge. They didn't walk with the practiced quiet of legacy halls. They walked with purpose. A girl in a durag and heavy coat held the first sign Jamal saw. Genius isn't always white. Another read. Stop erasing black brilliance. And then, bold and unmissable, stand with Jamal. Jamal froze where he stood. His breath caught. He didn't know these people. They didn't know him. But they were here. From Bristol, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds. Dozens at first. Then dozens more. They moved as a single body toward the mathematics department entrance. And sat. A peaceful sit-in. Right on the steps of the building that claimed it was looking for truth, while actively burying it. He saw Chloe near the back. Hood up. Eyes flicking around nervously. When she spotted him, she didn't smile. Didn't wave. But she nodded once. A small human thing. A piece of solidarity too fragile to name. A middle-aged black man, wearing a university lanyard from another school, grabbed a megaphone. He wasn't loud, but his voice carried like someone who'd learned to speak over silence. "We are here," he said, "because brilliance shouldn't cost someone their future. Because when a black student achieves what others couldn't, the answer shouldn't be suspicion." Cheers rose. Not wild, not chaotic. Controlled, purposeful. Another student, a girl wearing a purple hijab, raised her sign. "Review the racism, not the student." Jamal stood at the edge, watching. He felt out of his own body. They weren't chanting his name for ego. They were chanting for survival, theirs and his, for a narrative bigger than any single campus. But Cambridge didn't appreciate disruptions. Campus security arrived within minutes. 5 guards in navy jackets, tense in their stances though no one had moved aggressively. One guard approached the group, hands clasped behind his back. "This is an unauthorized demonstration," he said. "You need to disperse." "No," the girl in the durag replied. "We're staying." The guard shifted. "Failure to comply may result in disciplinary actions." "We don't attend this school," another student said. "What exactly do you plan to discipline?" The guard stiffened, unsure how to respond. Another wave of students arrived from the side gate. 30, maybe 40 more, settling into cross-legged positions on the stone walkway. The mathematics department curtains quivered. Faculty silhouettes hovered behind glass, watching, waiting, worried. Not worried about Jamal. Worried about optics. Dean Harrison arrived next, dressed in a long charcoal coat, his expression carefully neutral. His gaze swept across the crowd, but didn't linger. He approached one of the guards, whispering something too low for anyone to hear, then stepped forward. "This demonstration is inappropriate and based on misinformation," he announced. "Cambridge is committed to fairness and integrity. The ongoing review will proceed without disruption." A man from the sit-in stood. "Then why punish the student before the review ends?" Harrison didn't flinch. "No punitive action has been taken." "You banned him from using his own laptop," someone yelled from the back. "That was protocol." "You suspended him from math lectures," another voice added. "That was temporary." "You're threatening his scholarship." "That is standard procedure." "Standard for who?" The girl in the durag shot back. "Because I'm willing to bet if any other student solved a 42-year problem, you'd be throwing a parade." Whispers spread through the crowd, louder now. Harrison's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to losing control of a room. Especially not outdoors, not in front of cameras, not with students of other institutions leading the narrative. Jamal watched from a distance, hidden partly behind a statue. He didn't want to be the center of attention, didn't want to escalate, but he couldn't deny the ache building in him. The surreal, overwhelming feeling of seeing strangers take risks for him when the place he earned a spot in wouldn't even say his name without caution. He stepped forward, slowly, carefully, without raising his voice. The crowd noticed before Harrison did. "Jamal's here," someone whispered. Heads turned. Then the whisper became a ripple. Then a wave. "Let him speak," a boy shouted. But Jamal didn't raise his hand, didn't climb any steps. He simply approached the front edge of the sit-in, standing near the girl in the durag. She looked at him, surprised but steady. Harrison swallowed. "Mr. Reaves, I didn't ask anyone to come here," Jamal said softly, "but I'm grateful they did." The crowd went quiet. "And I'm not here to fight," he continued. "I'm not here to disrespect the university. I came here to learn. That's all I ever wanted." His voice didn't shake. "I didn't commit misconduct. I didn't cheat. I showed my work. I explained my process. And instead of being asked how I solved it, I was asked why I thought I had the right to." Chloe closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. Harrison's expression hardened, the kind of hardness used to prevent cracks from showing. "This isn't the time or place for emotional appeals," the dean said. "This isn't emotional," Jamal replied. "This is factual." He held up the scholarship review letter. "This says I might lose everything because I solved a problem better than people expected me to." The silence swallowed the courtyard whole. A single camera phone captured the moment, one held by a student from Manchester, live streaming to a small but growing audience online. Harrison took a step forward. "Mr. Reaves, the university's process must proceed without interference. You are not permitted to discuss internal investigations publicly." "Then why did you let rumors run wild before giving me a chance to speak?" Jamal asked. Harrison froze. The crowd murmured loudly now. The girl in the durag stood beside Jamal, lifting her sign higher. Security tensed. Faculty members pressed their faces closer to the windows. It was the kind of moment institutions feared, when silence became too loud to ignore. But Cambridge still tried. By noon, an official university statement appeared online. We recognize the right to peaceful demonstration, but firmly deny any allegations of discrimination. Ongoing inquiries regarding academic integrity are standard protocol. The protesters read it on their phones. Their laughter was sharp, not cruel, incredulous. Standard, someone repeated. Sure. Media coverage trickled in, a few local reporters, no big outlets. Most framed it as minor disruption, routine confusion, or online misunderstanding. But then, a video hit the internet, quietly, without fanfare, without context. Someone had uploaded it anonymously. A grainy recording, captured inside a faculty lounge. Kingsley's voice. A few other professors nearby. The camera shook slightly, like someone had hidden a phone inside a coat pocket. Should have been taught his place, Kingsley said, irritated. Clipped, brilliance or not. He doesn't understand how Cambridge works. Another voice replied. It's already spreading. Students outside. Posters. Kingsley scoffed. Then it's more important than ever that we deal with him properly. Before this turns into a symbol. Jamal's heart stopped in his chest. The crowd outside erupted, not in noise, but in stunned, electric silence. People watched the clip twice, 3 times. The air vibrated with disbelief and fury. Kingsley said it, out loud, on tape. He didn't say Jamal cheated. He didn't say the math was wrong. He said Jamal should have been taught his place. The truth was no longer whispered. It was recorded, documented, unraveling. As the outrage swelled, Jamal's phone buzzed. A new email from the university. Only 3 words, report to Senate. The real fight was about to begin. The video didn't just spread, it detonated. One moment it lived quietly on a single anonymous account. The next it moved like wind through dry fields, leaping from Twitter to TikTok to Instagram Reels, crossing borders faster than Cambridge could draft its first denial. Students reposted it. Alumni whispered about it. Journalists speculated. And those who had always suspected the brittle fragility of academic meritocracy finally had proof. A Cambridge professor, one of the institution's oldest pillars, caught on tape saying Jamal should have been taught his place. It wasn't a crack in the facade. It was a fracture. The hashtag Teach Him His Place exploded, alongside a counterwave. Teach Kingsley retirement. Black brilliance blocked. Cambridge exposed. By midday, over 300,000 posts used one of the tags. Endless debates flooded comment sections. Some argued tradition. Some argued merit. Some pretended neutrality. But the ones who mattered, the ones who lived through the same discrimination, recognized the truth instantly. This wasn't a scandal. It was confirmation. Jamal watched the chaos unfold silently from the corner of his dorm room, the hum of his radiator barely audible over the constant vibration of his phone. Every notification was a reminder. The world suddenly knew more about his story than he ever intended to share. Chloe knocked lightly before entering. She didn't ask permission. Jamal didn't have the strength to grant it anyway. She stood by his desk, watching him scroll through the tidal wave of reactions. Are you okay? She asked softly. He let out a dry breath. I don't know. People are finally seeing it, she whispered. They can't bury this now. Jamal turned toward her, eyes tired. Seeing doesn't mean believing. They'll still twist it. They can't twist a recording. They'll try. Outside, the protesters had returned. Louder, bigger, no longer from just other universities. Adults, activists, scholars who had been pushed out of spaces like these. Their chants seeped through the window. Protect black brilliance. Justice for Jamal. No more silence. But Cambridge wasn't a place that bowed easily. By afternoon, the university issued a 3-sentence statement. Cambridge is aware of the circulated video. We are conducting an internal review. We remain committed to fairness and excellence. 3 sentences built like a shield. No mention of Jamal. No condemnation of Kingsley. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just a vague promise of a review, knowing reviews could be stretched for years. But Cambridge underestimated the storm this time. Within hours, several prestigious journals quietly removed Kingsley from their editorial boards. A major science foundation froze one of his grants, citing ethical concern. Former students shared stories, not of explicit racism, but of subtle gatekeeping, cold discouragement, and legacy loyalty. The pressure built fast, and for the first time in decades, Kingsley felt something he had never felt within these walls: isolation. By evening, an announcement appeared on the Cambridge main site, not as a headline, but buried 3 clicks deep. Professor Alistair Kingsley to retire due to health reasons. A 9-sentence statement, praising his years of loyal service, academic excellence, and contributions to institutional tradition. Not a single mention of the video. Not a single admission. Not a single apology. Just a neatly packaged exit. Like placing a burning house behind a velvet curtain. Chloe read it over Jamal's shoulder. The health reasons, she muttered. They're pretending nothing happened. Damage control, Jamal said, voice flat. That video was proof. That video was an inconvenience, he interrupted. Not justice. He walked to the window, watching the clouds shift above the ancient towers. The city looked unchanged, unbothered, eternal, as if centuries of power had taught it to withstand storms without letting anyone see it sweat. He's gone, Chloe said gently. That's something. No, Jamal said. It's nothing. They removed the man but kept the system. And that system is still investigating me. Chloe didn't argue. She couldn't. Because the truth hung heavily between them. Kingsley's retirement meant no victory. If anything, it tightened the university's defensive walls. They refused to exonerate Jamal, refused to acknowledge the damage, refused to stop the academic review. The next morning, Jamal received another email, cold and bureaucratic. Your academic integrity investigation will proceed, uninterrupted. Recent events do not alter the process. Translated, don't think this changes your fate. Later that day, the disciplinary panel requested another meeting. Same room, same chairs, same stale air. Jamal entered alone. He didn't bring Chloe this time. He didn't need comfort. He needed clarity. The panel sat stone-faced. Dr. Wickford began. Given recent media attention, the university will not be issuing further public statements until a comprehensive review is completed. This includes commentary on your academic standing. Jamal kept his voice even. So you can fire Kingsley overnight. But clearing my name is too complicated. Morton tightened his jaw. We did not fire anyone. You expect me to believe he voluntarily retired the same day that video surfaced. If you continue making assumptions, Jamal leaned forward. The only assumption I made was thinking this university cared about truth. Silence. The kind that tasted metallic. Wickford finally said. That will be all for today. A dismissal disguised as procedure. As Jamal walked out, he could feel eyes following him. Not curious, not empathetic, just assessing, calculating, measuring his disruption. He returned to his dorm exhausted, the protests still echoing faintly through the courtyard. His inbox was a battlefield. Threats, praise, interviews he'd never requested, strangers begging him to sue, strangers begging him to stay quiet. He ignored it all, until something slid quietly under his door. No knock.
No footsteps.
Just a soft whisper against the carpet. He stared at it for a moment before picking it up. A plain envelope. No name. No marking. No institutional seal. It wasn't thin like a letter. It wasn't stiff like a summons. It had weight. Jamal closed the door behind him, locking it instinctively. He sat on his bed and tore the top carefully. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, thick, textured, the kind used in legal offices. He unfolded it slowly. A short typed message stared back at him. This isn't over, Jamal. And you're not wrong. Protect yourself. It was signed by Professor Alistair Kingsley. The signature wasn't digitally printed. It wasn't forged. It was ink, uneven pressure marks, strokes that sank deep into the fibers of the paper. Beneath it, taped to the bottom, was a small black flash drive. Jamal's pulse kicked. He lifted it carefully, turning it over in his hand. No label, no indicator, just a single USB. From the same man who told him he should have stayed quiet. From the same man now disgraced in the public eye. From the same man who supposedly left for health reasons. Why would Kingsley send him anything? Why not the university? Why now? Jamal felt something icy crawl across his spine. Was this a trap? An apology? A final blow? A warning? He held the flash drive between his fingers. Whatever this was, whoever had dropped it, this wasn't part of the university's plan. It wasn't part of anyone's plan. As Jamal plugged the flash drive into his laptop, a single folder appeared. One title. Before They Erase Me. The folder name pulsed on the screen like a heartbeat. Before They Erase Me. Jamal stared at it for a long moment. The room painfully silent except for the soft hum of his old radiator. Outside, Cambridge still looked dignified. Towers untouched, lawns trimmed, traditions preserved like museum artifacts. But inside this dorm, everything sacred about the institution was unraveling by the click of a mouse. He double-clicked the folder. Inside were 8 video files, each time-stamped, each labeled only with dates. The earliest was from the most recent 6 months ago. Jamal clicked on the first. A grainy image filled the screen. A conference room with polished wooden walls, high-backed leather chairs, and a long mahogany table. The camera angle was tilted upward from under the table, like someone had hidden a recording device beneath a pile of documents. Voices filtered through. Crisp, British, rehearsed. Scholarship trends need refining. We've admitted too many candidates who don't fit the institutional identity. Institutional identity. The words crawled across Jamal's nerves like ice. Another voice chimed in, older, rougher. We cannot allow merit to override tradition. If we open the gates too widely, Cambridge becomes diluted. A sharp laugh followed. A younger voice, nervous, trying to blend in, asked quietly, "Are we referring to international applicants, or we're referring to whoever does not reflect our legacy?" The rough voice interrupted. A pause. Then the click of a teacup. Jamal's hands tightened on the laptop. Legacy. He clicked the next file. This one was clearer, the camera newer. Jamal recognized one of the professors immediately. Dr. Morton from the disciplinary panel. The same cold voice now carried a different kind of confidence behind closed doors. We must be careful with scholarships given to certain demographics. Representation is good for marketing, not for academic balance. Academic balance. Another chimed in. The American applicants especially. They come from school systems with inflated achievements. Looks impressive on paper, but rarely holds up in our environment. You mean the black ones? Someone said casually, like discussing weather. A short silence followed. Morton cleared his throat. We should maintain selective pathways. If we introduce too much variation, we lose control. Control. That's what this was about. Not fairness, not integrity, not even tradition. Control of who belonged. Control of who didn't. Jamal clicked a third video, his pulse pounding now. A different room, fewer faculty, a different year, but the same energy, the same coded language, the same strategy. American scholarship candidates must be vetted more carefully, said Dr. Wickford. We've accepted a few who gave us challenges. A chuckle. What kind of challenges? Expectations beyond their place. Expectation. Place. Words sharp as glass. The next voice made Jamal freeze. Professor Kingsley. Brilliance is only useful when accompanied by respect for hierarchy. We've seen what happens when students think talent makes them equal. A deeper voice responded. Then rule it before it spreads. Jamal stopped the video abruptly. His chest felt tight. He forced himself to take slow breaths, grounding himself against the surge of anger rising in him. This wasn't a conspiracy. This was policy. He hovered over the next file, the most recent one. A file dated only 6 months before he arrived. He clicked. This room was smaller. Quieter. A faculty lounge with couches arranged around a coffee table. 3 people were present, including someone Jamal recognized immediately. Alistair Kingsley. The camera angle again suggested a hidden recorder. Someone had placed it discreetly under a pile of books or inside a bag. Kingsley sat with legs crossed, reading glasses perched atop his head. He looked relaxed, too relaxed. Next year's applicant list. A professor said, "We've got a promising candidate from Atlanta. High test scores. Several independent math projects. A bit young though." Kingsley took the paper, skimmed, and smirked. "Let me guess," he said dryly. "Another brilliant American boy with an underdog story. Something like that." Kingsley's smirk lingered. "Well, admit him," he said. "We need the numbers." Another professor looked up. "The numbers?"
Yes, Kingsley said. Diversity figures for the annual report.
Upper administration keeps nagging about representation. We give them one face, and they'll be satisfied. Another professor leaned back. "But what if he's actually talented?" Kingsley shrugged. "Talented how? Their system inflates everything. He'll struggle. They all do." The room chuckled. "And if he doesn't?" someone asked. Kingsley paused, then said calmly, "Then we teach him his place." Jamal felt the air leave his lungs. He clicked the final seconds of the video, though he knew he didn't need to. Everything he needed, had already been said. This campus had never intended to nurture him. It had prepared to contain him, to use him as a number, then choke him the moment he exceeded their script. He leaned back, pressing the heel of his palms into his eyes. For a long time he didn't move, didn't breathe properly. The heaviness in the room pressed down like an extra gravity, thick, suffocating. This flash drive wasn't just evidence. It was confession. But whose confession? Kingsley's? Or the junior professor who had recorded these meetings and disappeared from the faculty listings? Jamal opened the folder again, scrolling to the metadata. The file origin listed a username, and Ashford Dachiar. He didn't know the name, but a quick search led him to a buried resignation announcement from last year. Assistant Professor Michael Ashford resigns for personal reasons. No details. No explanation. Just gone. Had he recorded them for protection? For leverage? For conscience? And why had Kingsley, the very face of the system, delivered the drive? Was this guilt? Revenge? Or something darker? Before Jamal could untangle the questions, his laptop pinged. A new message. No subject line. No signature. No contact information. Just one line of text. Release that and you'll never work in academia again. Jamal's skin crawled. The timing wasn't coincidence. They knew. Someone knew. He read it again. And again. The threat was too calm, too certain, too familiar with power. As if academia didn't belong to knowledge, but to gatekeepers. He stood slowly, walking to his window. Across the courtyard, protest posters still leaned against benches. The phrases painted in thick strokes echoed his heartbeat. Genius isn't always white. Stop erasing black brilliance. Cambridge exposed. He had evidence that could burn centuries of academic arrogance to ash. Evidence that could prove what no one had dared say publicly. Evidence that could tear down a system designed to control boys like him. But the warning lingered like smoke. You'll never work in academia again. Jamal pressed his forehead against the cold glass. This wasn't just a decision about the university. It was a decision about his future. If he spoke, he'd lose the world he dreamed of. If he stayed silent, he'd lose himself. His laptop buzzed again. Another message. This one with a name. Dean Harrison. I need to see you. Now. Jamal sat across from Dean Harrison in a room colder than it should have been. The old radiator hissed in the corner, failing to keep up with the tension pressed between them like a sealed envelope. Harrison didn't speak at first. He simply studied Jamal, not like a student, not like a threat, but like a problem, one he'd failed to contain. Finally, he folded his hands. You have something, he said softly. Don't you?
Jamal didn't answer.
Harrison continued. I've been told you received recordings. I won't ask who gave them to you. But I will say this. If you value your career, you'll destroy them. Jamal sat still, expression unreadable. Do you believe in Cambridge? Harrison asked, voice low. The ideal of it, the tradition of it, the future of it. I believed in the version they sold me, Jamal replied. Not the one I've seen since arriving. Harrison leaned forward. We're not perfect. No place is. But if you go public with whatever you've got, you won't just ruin reputations. You'll damage an institution. That stain doesn't come out. Not even for you. Jamal looked him in the eye. What do you think I'm trying to save? Harrison blinked. You're afraid I'll destroy Cambridge. Jamal continued. But Cambridge already destroyed itself. I just watched it do it. The room went still. I won't warn you again. Harrison said. His tone hardened. Now, this university has survived wars. Monarchs. Generations. It can survive you. But you won't survive it if you push too far. Jamal stood slowly. So be it. He left the office with no plan, no speech, no audience. Just truth. That night, Jamal sat in front of his laptop. The recordings were queued up. Each labeled, each dangerous. He knew what publishing them would do. To the university. To himself. To any future he might have had in academic spaces. But silence had its own cost. And it had already taken too much. He created a fresh burner account. Untraceable. Anonymous. And at 2:14 a.m., the world changed. He uploaded everything. No name. No context. Just the video. He didn't attach his face. Didn't add his story. Didn't post on his main accounts. Didn't even watch them go live. He closed the laptop and waited. By morning it had begun. First a whisper. Then an inferno. The files spread like wildfire. Cambridge files began trending globally. Scholars shared clips, Activists demanded accountability. Entire academic institutions responded in real time, distancing themselves from the recorded voices, condemning the language.
News outlets dove in. BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera.
This isn't just racism, one anchor said. This is systemic preservation of power under the guise of tradition. The phrase echoed everywhere. Brilliance only useful when it respects hierarchy. We admit them for the numbers. Teach him his place. The protesters returned in force. Hundreds this time. Not just students, alumni, donors, public figures. A retired professor released a statement confirming the authenticity of the recordings. He called them Cambridge's original sin finally made visible. Then came the withdrawals. One by one, legacy donors issued letters of disassociation. Family endowments pulled their contributions. Scholarship sponsors suspended funding until investigations concluded. An open letter signed by over 900 global scholars condemned the culture captured in the recordings. Cambridge responded, slowly, cautiously, politically. We are launching an independent investigation. We take all allegations seriously. We remain committed to diversity. But they still didn't mention Jamal. He watched from a distance as the institution he once admired twisted in discomfort. He didn't speak, didn't grant interviews, didn't return messages. While chaos unfurled in his name, he moved through campus like a ghost. Professors avoided eye contact. Students whispered more than ever. Some praised him. Some blamed him. Most simply feared him. Because silence in Cambridge was sacred, and he had shattered it. One afternoon, as he passed through the library courtyard, he saw a small sign pinned to a post. Cambridge belongs to its legacy, not its mistakes. Jamal stopped, read it once, then tore it down. Later that evening, a letter slipped under his door. No name, no signature, just 2 sentences. Thank you for telling the truth. Some of us were too scared to. You're not alone. The letter was folded around a newspaper clipping. Minority enrollment at historic lows despite scholarship expansion. Jamal stared at the words for a long time, then tucked them into his notebook. The institution had been pierced, but not broken, and he still hadn't been cleared. Unexpected twist. 2 weeks after the files leaked, Jamal received a formal notice from the academic board. The integrity review has concluded. Findings: inconclusive. Action: indefinite academic hold. No apology, no correction, no reinstatement. They weren't punishing him. They were freezing him, leaving him in limbo, a reminder to anyone who might try the same. But the world kept watching. In a quiet corner of the internet, something else began to move. A nomination, buried in an announcement from the Global Institute of Pure Mathematics. In recognition of elegant breakthrough analysis on a 4-decade problem, we are proud to list the following nominees for the 2025 laureate in mathematics. A list followed. One name stood out: Norigin42, pseudonymous contributor, whose boundary proof has redefined the problem space. Jamal saw it by accident, a retweet from a math forum he hadn't visited in weeks. His heart thumped once, hard. He clicked the link, reading it again and again. His work, the solution he'd posted anonymously, was now one of the most celebrated breakthroughs in modern mathematics. And they still didn't know who he was. Or rather, they did, but they weren't willing to say it. He emailed the organization's committee, attaching proof of authorship, timestamps, and video evidence. They responded politely. Thank you for your clarification. We have reached out to Cambridge for formal verification of your academic affiliation before proceeding. He knew what that meant. He waited. 2 days later, a final reply came. We regret to inform you that we are unable to confirm your identity or institutional standing with Cambridge. The nomination will remain anonymous until validation is secured. Cambridge had blocked it, refused to verify him. The one thing they had left, erasing his name from his own success. Jamal stared at the screen. Not angry, not surprised, just quiet. He opened his notebook, wrote a single line: let the world praise the solution, and stay scared of the mind that gave it. Then his phone lit up. A call. Unknown number. He answered. A woman's voice, confident, American. Is this Jamal Reaves? I'm calling from the laureate committee. I think it's time we talked, not about Cambridge, but about what comes next. Cambridge never apologized. It strategized. It maneuvered. It recalculated the moment the global mathematics community began circling Jamal's breakthrough like a constellation shifting around a new star. The phone call from the laureate committee had shaken the quiet corridors of the mathematics department harder than the video leaks ever had. A 17-year-old black freshman from Atlanta, suspended, silenced, unacknowledged, being considered for one of the most prestigious awards in the world. It wasn't just a threat to Cambridge's reputation. It was a threat to its mythology. So the university did what powerful institutions do when backed into a corner. It tried to rewrite the narrative before someone else could. The morning after his call with the laureate committee, Jamal received another email. This one stamped with the official crest, the digital seal shimmering beneath the subject line. Urgent, meeting with Dean Harrison, requested. Not optional, not suggested. Requested Cambridge language for mandatory. He arrived at the administrative building with a quiet resolve. Not anger, not fear, just clarity. The flash drive, the recordings, the nomination, everything converged into a single truth he could no longer avoid. They didn't fear his conduct. They feared his existence. Dean Harrison waited in his office, standing rather than sitting, hands clasped behind his back like someone preparing to deliver a verdict. The blinds were half drawn, casting long diagonal shadows across the carpet. Jamal, Harrison said with a controlled smile. Thank you for coming. Jamal didn't return it. You said it was urgent. It is. Harrison gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. Please. Jamal remained standing. I'm fine here. A flicker of annoyance darted through the dean's eyes, but he hid it quickly, shifting into the polished tone of a man accustomed to negotiation. You've caused quite a stir, Harrison began. International attention, protests, media inquiries, and now, whispers of major award discussions. You mean the nomination, Jamal said. Harrison nodded once. Yes. That. He walked around the desk and sat deliberately, folding his hands. Cambridge wants to make things right. Jamal waited. We are prepared to reinstate your scholarship in full, Harrison said. Effective immediately, your suspension from mathematics courses will be lifted. And he paused, letting the moment breathe. We will publicly clear your name regarding the academic misconduct allegations. Jamal didn't move, didn't blink, didn't celebrate, because he was waiting for the other half of the sentence, the part Harrison was trying to dress up as generosity. And in return, Jamal asked. Harrison inhaled, then reached into a drawer. He pulled out a crisp document, several pages thick, and slid it across the desk. A non-disclosure agreement. Not subtle. Not soft. Not even ashamed. We need your cooperation, Harrison said, to protect the integrity of both your academic future and the institution. Jamal didn't touch the document, didn't even look down at it. What are the terms? He asked. You would decline all interviews, all press requests, all public commentary on the investigation, the recordings, the protests, all of it. And Cambridge? Will announce the resolution succinctly and professionally. Harrison smiled thinly, a statement commending your exceptional talent and clarifying that the allegations lacked conclusive evidence. Lacked conclusive evidence, Jamal repeated. Not that they were false. Language matters, Harrison said. We must be precise. And the recordings? Jamal asked quietly. Harrison's smile vanished. Those were illegally obtained. If you sign the NDA, we will consider them irrelevant. If you don't— What? Jamal said. You'll sue me, sanction me, expel me. Harrison exhaled slowly, voice low. We will pursue all avenues to protect the university. Jamal's chest tightened with something sharp, not fear, not defiance, something deeper, something final. You're not offering me a future, he said softly. You're offering me a leash. Harrison's jaw tensed. We're offering you a path out of this with dignity. Whose dignity? Jamal asked. Mine or the university's? The dean's silence answered for him. Jamal stepped forward and placed a single fingertip on the NDA. Not in curiosity but in dismissal. He slid it back across the desk. I'm not signing anything. Harrison's composure cracked. Jamal, be reasonable. If my future depends on silence, Jamal said, voice steady, then it's not a future, it's a sentence. Harrison stood abruptly. You are making a mistake. So did you, Jamal replied, when you thought I'd trade truth for your approval. He walked to the door. You won't win this, Harrison said behind him, tone now stripped of diplomacy. Jamal paused only long enough to say, I already did, and he left, not with triumph, but with decision. By noon he had booked a small auditorium space near the student center. He sent no invitations, released no statements, told no reporters. He didn't need to. Cambridge was already vibrating with tension, and silence had become his loudest ally. When he arrived, the room was already packed. Students filled every seat. Others stood shoulder to shoulder along the back wall. Protesters from outside streamed in. Even a handful of faculty sat near the edges, trying to look casual. Chloe approached him with wide eyes. "What are you going to say?" "Whatever they don't want me to," Jamal replied. She nodded, tears threatening but held back. "I'm with you." He stepped toward the podium. Cameras lifted. Phone screens glowed. The murmur quieted into anticipation. But before he reached the microphone, the doors opened. A tall figure entered, dressed in a charcoal suit and light blue scarf. The room shifted immediately. Students whispered, heads turning, some gasping. Jamal didn't recognize him, but many others clearly did. Chloe inhaled sharply. "No way." The man walked with slow, assured steps to the front row, where he stopped and looked at Jamal, with eyes that held both kindness and fire. He extended his hand. "Jamal Reaves," he said, his American accent warm and unmistakable. "I'm Dr. Nathaniel Carr, Princeton." The murmurs surged. Dr. Carr, a legend, one of the most celebrated mathematicians of the last half-century, a man whose publications shaped modern theoretical frameworks, a man known not just for genius, but for building futures for students who didn't come wrapped in legacy. "I flew here the moment I heard what Cambridge did to you," Dr. Carr said, "and I came to tell you something before you speak." Jamal stared, unable to form words. Carr leaned in slightly. "You don't need their permission to be great," he said quietly, "and you damn sure don't need their validation." The room fell silent. Then Carr added, louder for everyone to hear, "If you want it, I'll mentor you myself. Princeton will welcome you tomorrow." Shock rippled across the auditorium. Gasps, whispers, a few suppressed cheers. Jamal felt the weight of the moment, not like pressure but like release, like his chest had been carrying not just his own breath but generations of silencings, erasures, exclusion. And now someone had cracked the cage open. Dr. Carr stepped back and gestured toward the podium. "Go on, Jamal," he said. "Tell them the truth." Jamal placed his hands on the microphone, and the room held its breath. Jamal didn't read from notes. He didn't need to. As he stood at the podium that afternoon, in a crowded hall at the University of Cambridge, facing a room of protesters, peers and a living legend from Princeton, he didn't speak with bitterness. He didn't raise his voice or perform rage. He simply told the truth, raw, deliberate, and exact. He told them how he'd seen the math problem on day one, how he'd solved it in 40 seconds, how laughter turned to whispers, how whispers became accusations, how accusations became institutional gaslighting. He didn't say Cambridge failed him. He said Cambridge revealed itself. He ended with this: "If excellence must come dressed in legacy to be seen, then you were never looking for excellence at all." And then he left. No applause, no bows, just silence, the kind that follows truth before it decides to become change. Within a month, Jamal officially withdrew from Cambridge. Within 2, he enrolled at Princeton. Within 6, he was invited to give a TED Talk. He stood under the signature red circle with a spotlight on his face, and opened with, "I didn't survive elitism to belong to it." The room sat stunned, then erupted. The talk went viral. Black Brilliance Isn't a Disruption racked up over 4 million views in its first week. By the time the committee announced him as the first ever laureate recipient under 20, Jamal had become more than a math prodigy. He was a movement. But Jamal didn't get lost in headlines. He got to work. He published 3 peer-reviewed papers on abstract number theory before turning 19. Each was quietly revolutionary. Each bore his name at the top. Each included a single-line footnote in honor of those still unheard in rooms of silence. He launched a non-profit out of a cramped dorm office, Equation for Equity, an initiative to find, fund, and mentor young math prodigies from historically marginalized communities across the U.S. and abroad. The goal wasn't just scholarships, it was survival. Survival in rooms like the one that tried to break him. The initiative began with 10 students, then 20, then 100. Schools reached out. Foundations pledged support. Tech companies offered grants. But Jamal never handed out pity. Only tools. "You are not less," he told his scholars. "You are underfed brilliance. Let's fix that." Every speech he gave wasn't just a talk, it was testimony. At Harvard, brilliance doesn't have a skin color. But the gate often does. At Oxford, which you call tradition, I call exclusion, dressed in Latin. At Stanford, if you only recognize genius once it speaks your language, you're not recognizing genius. You're echoing yourself. He turned down honorary degrees. He turned down board seats. He turned down institutions that wanted his image but not his voice. But even as he rose, Cambridge didn't speak. No correction. No retraction. No admission. They scrubbed his name from online archives, erased his photo from group shots, buried every trace of his time there like a glitch in the record. Yet the world remembered. So did he, especially when young students whispered his name at conferences, asked for advice, thanked him not for winning but for not folding. The boy they once labeled problem child had become a global problem solver, but he never celebrated, because he knew the math, visibility nail vindication. Years passed. Jamal moved quietly through greatness. He completed his doctorate, published a groundbreaking proof that unified two previously incompatible theorems. Forbes called it the most important intellectual contribution by someone under 25 in a generation. He didn't react. Instead, he used the prize money to build permanent headquarters for his nonprofit in Atlanta, walking distance from the school where he first fell in love with numbers. The front wall read in tall, bold letters, "We solve more than equations." Inside, a mural spanned the hallway, black, brown, and indigenous kids scribbling equations, holding chalk like torches, standing in lecture halls. Below it, a line. From underestimated to undeniable. He'd become the face of what was possible. But he never stopped thinking about what wasn't, and what still wasn't. One evening, just after sunset, Jamal sat on the back steps of the building alone, sipping black tea in silence. His assistant, Zuri, emerged holding a manila envelope. "This just arrived," she said, handing it over. "From overseas." Jamal raised a brow. "From who?" Zuri shrugged. "No return address. But it's got that look." Jamal opened it slowly. Inside was a single ivory sheet of heavy paper, thick with legacy, sharp with weight. At the top, in elegant serif font, it read, "University of Cambridge, Faculty of Mathematics." Jamal froze. The words stared back, like a dare. Below, typed neatly,
Mr. Reaves.
"We invite you to return to Cambridge this fall as a guest lecturer for the annual Horizons in Mathematics series. Your contributions to the global field are undeniable, and we believe your insights will benefit our current and future scholars. We hope to welcome you home." Home. The word crawled. Jamal flipped the letter over. No handwritten note, no apology, no signature of remorse, just a formality, a summons cloaked as recognition, a gesture too late. He sat in silence for several minutes, then folded the letter carefully and placed it on the stair beside him. Zuri sat down. "You okay?" He nodded once. "Yeah. Just surprised." "You going?" "I don't know," he said truthfully. She looked at him. "They're not inviting you. They're inviting your shadow, the part they can parade now that the crowd's cheering." He exhaled. "Exactly. Then maybe go," Zuri said. "But make sure the shadow doesn't show up alone." Jamal chuckled. Soft, tired. She stood, paused, and added gently, "Or send one of our students instead." That idea stayed with him long after she left. He picked the envelope back up, running his fingers across the embossed crest. Cambridge. The institution that erased him. Now pretending he'd always been a part of it. He wasn't angry. He was aware. He thought about the freshmen currently walking those same cold halls. The next Jamal. The one too quiet to protest. Too isolated to speak. Too brilliant to be ignored. But ignored anyway. And he made a decision. He pulled out his laptop, opened a blank document, and began typing the title of the lecture he'd deliver at Cambridge. The Math of Exclusion. Why some equations are designed never to solve. The air on the Cambridge quadrangle felt different this time. Not colder, not warmer, just changed. It held a quiet curiosity, a distant memory trembling toward acknowledgement. As Jamal C. Reaves walked through the ancient archway, his footsteps echoed softly on the stone. He passed by the wrought iron gates, the spired towers, the weathered hallways, all familiar, all heavy with the weight of history. But this time he carried something that had once been invisible, recognition. His arrival wasn't announced. There were no banners, no press, no fanfare. Just the soft rustle of papers and the hush that followed him down the corridors. Students glanced up from books, their eyes widening in slow, surprised recognition. Others turned away quickly, as if unsure whether to stare. Professors lingered in doorways, eyebrows raised. The same lecture hall where he had first stood, the hall that had once cracked with derision, now felt small, pliable, receptive. Jamal paused at the entrance of the hall, letting the silence settle around him. He remembered that day, the chalkboard equation, the laughter, the doubt. He remembered standing with chalk in hand, and hundreds of eyes on him, questioning whether a black kid from Atlanta had the audacity to solve an unsolvable problem. He remembered the scoffs, the politics, the institution that tried to erase him. Now the only sound was the soft rustle of his own breath, the shuffle of students seating themselves, the distant creak of old wood benches. He didn't need to speak yet. His presence was enough. He walked to the front, to the podium. The chalkboard behind him was empty, blank, waiting. But in that emptiness was possibility. Jamal stood, calm, confident. The room exhaled. He didn't look through a script. He didn't need notes. All he needed was gravity, and the truth. He began. Years ago, this room echoed with silence. Not because the problem was unsolved. Because the world, this world, refused to see the one who solved it. His voice was soft, but it carried, resonated. He paused, looked around, eyes, once cold, now warm, curious, respectful. He said, "Today the equations on this board don't matter. Because this board, these walls have changed. They bend now, not to legacy, but to possibility. Not to pedigree, but to potential." A hush so deep fell that even the crackle of the old heater seemed loud. Students shifted. Professors looked down at their shoes. Some faces glowed with recognition, others with regret. Jamal didn't mention names. He didn't need to. The weight of history, their history hung in the air without a single syllable. He reached into his pocket and pulled a piece of chalk, not for a theorem, not for a legacy problem, but a new blank board. Turning, he wrote one word. Large, centered, bold. Believe. Silence followed. Then soft clapping. Then more. A ripple turned to a wave. The board didn't nod. The room did. He set the chalk down gently and turned to the audience. Every time a name is whispered in fear, remember, brilliance isn't silent. And it isn't invisible. It speaks. It solves. It survives. He nodded once, softly, and stepped away. The room stayed still. No rush. No applause, just reverence. Afterward, students surrounded him. Old classmates who had ignored him now offered quiet congratulations. Professors shook his hand, some awkwardly, some with genuine respect. A few tears, a few nods. None of them said, "Welcome back," but their eyes said it all. He exited the hall, walking slowly through the historic corridors. Portraits of former scholars, all white, lined the walls. Each one watched him pass, silent witnesses to change. He didn't look at them. He didn't need to. Their legacy was reacting now. Outside, the courtyard lay in soft evening light. Strings of lamps flickered on. The spires glowed. Students moved between buildings, some pausing to watch him. Whispers trailed behind him. Quiet names, hushed tones. Then he felt something slip into his hand. A small folded note. He looked down. A young black girl, maybe 17 or 18, stood a few feet away, her backpack heavy, her posture hesitant but hopeful. Their eyes met for a moment. She didn't speak. She only nodded. He unfolded the note carefully. The words inside were short, sharp, alive. "I'm next." Jamal closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. The weight of those two words pressed harder than any chalkboard equation had. He looked up and walked toward her. She held out her hand. Not for recognition, not for thanks, but for solidarity. He didn't smile. He didn't offer comfort. He offered strength. He placed the note carefully into his pocket, folded and walked away. Behind him, the campus lights glowed softly, like stars bowing to a new constellation. A new chapter had begun. But for that girl, and countless others, the work had just started. As he disappeared into the dusk, the girl lingered. She watched him go, then opened a phone and typed a message. "They'll hear me soon." And with that, silence on the quad was replaced by a whisper, a threat, a promise, a new problem born from the old one, and a future ready to solve it. No student should ever be punished for being brilliant, or for being black. If Jamal's story opened your eyes, or reminded you of a truth too many still ignore. Don't let it fade. Type yes if you believe silence protects injustice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.